Good morning and welcome to Soil as a Carbon Sink and our third seminar. Today we will focus on visualization methods and models for soil carbon sequestration. Because to reap the benefits from carbon sequestration in soil, it's essential to calculate and to communicate the effects of different carbon capture activities. And in this seminar here today, we will discuss different methods and models to do this. And we will engage in questions such as which methods and models exist, what are the advantages and disadvantages of these methods and models, and also what development is needed in order to increase the efficiency and accuracy in the models and methods. And also I'm curious to learn more about and try to understand how user-friendly are they. So I imagine that we have different target groups. It might be the researchers or foresters or farmers. So from the perspective of the target group, how user-friendly is the specific model or method? But why are we arranging this seminar and who is it that is organizing it? If we start with a why question. Increasing carbon storage in soil is proposed to be one of the most cost-effective climate measures, and a measure that also has other positive aspects, such as increased biodiversity and soil fertility. And the topic has gained the decision makers' attention, and it sits high on the political agenda throughout the Nordic region and elsewhere. However, the topic is complex. Knowledge is developing at a fast pace, and still a lot of questions remain unanswered. And also, this topic is associated with some challenges in terms of creating effective policy and managing potential goal conflicts in policy. And we also see some challenges in actually implementing into practice identified solutions and methods. But in the Nordic countries, we have similar soil types, similar climate, as well as related formulations in terms of policy, climate policy. And we believe that this creates good conditions for an increased Nordic collaboration on carbon storage in soil. So it is this potential coupled with the challenges that is the reason, the why we are organizing this seminar. If we turn to the who question then, who is organizing it? Well, this seminar today is part of a series of 4 seminars in total. And these seminars, they all aim at stimulating knowledge exchange between Nordic actors interested in this topic. And the seminars, they are initiated and funded by Nordic Forest Research, Nordic Agri Research, and a Nordic Council of Ministers Working Group for Climate and Air. And my name is Maria Thunberg, and I'm affiliated researcher at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. And on behalf of SNS and NKJ, I have the pleasure of guiding you through these seminars. And the first seminar was held back in November last year, and we then focused on the current state of knowledge within this field. And last week, many of us met and we discussed policy challenges and possibilities with effective policy. And then next week, you're most welcome back, as we will then have our 4th and final seminar, and we will focus on how to facilitate knowledge sharing in this field, so don't miss that. What is on the agenda then for today? Well, after some welcoming words from SNS and NKJ, we will kick off with our first speaker of today, and that's Johan Stendahl, who will be talking about carbon models for forest soils. We will then move from Sweden to Finland, and we will welcome Jari Liski, who is responsible for the Carbon Action Field Observatory project. And after that, we will move to Denmark, and I will invite Søren Kolin Hvid from Seges, who will focus on carbon modeling for Danish farms. And if you have any questions for our speakers, please post those in the chat function, and I will do my best to bring them into the conversation with the speakers. And after the 3 presentations, we will move into an interactive session with the speakers. I will invite our 3 speakers into a panel conversation. And here I would really like to encourage all participants to provide your questions in the chat so we can bring them into the conversation. And as you have probably realized by now, in this seminar we will only allow the speakers to communicate by sound, but we do encourage participation from all of you by then through the chat. So please share comments, links, etc. in the chat function. And I would also like to say that this seminar is being recorded and it will be distributed on SNS and NKJ websites at a later stage. And you can already now see the first two webinars on SNS webpage. So we will not distribute the specific slides, the PowerPoints from the 3 presentations, but rather encourage you to watch the recordings. I would now like to give the word to Jonas Rönnberg, who is overarching responsible for Nordic forest research and Nordic agri research. So good morning, Jonas. Could you please say a few words on what SNS and NKJ are, for those of us who doesn't know, and also why you are interested in this topic and organizing this seminar?
Thank you very much for that, Maria. Yes, of course, I would like to do that. And again, most welcome to everyone here now. It's really nice to see that we have so many signing up for these seminars and also joining when it's actually happening. So most welcome. Yes, we are a joint secretariat, we can say. We have separate boards, but we are hosted by SLU in Alnarp, where we have about 7 employees. I say about because it's a little bit depending on how you count. If we include Maria and Louise and some other people that we're also working with quite a lot. We work with research to policy as an interface and producing knowledge with a Nordic added value. We're quite much stimulating networking, but we also run a number of strategic projects like this one will classify as a strategic project for us. And we work, of course, a lot with communication. And so today's seminar is, of course, a little bit more on the communicative side, I would say. But we will hear more about that. Why are we interested? Well, you've already mentioned it, but I can say that under the Finnish chairmanship this year, it has also been raised the question, highlighted the importance of the soil carbon. Where is the carbon supposed to be to make the most benefit for us? Climate change has been mentioned. We're interested in the potential and the issues with the soils, both on the agricultural side and the forest side. More recently, we have, at least in Sweden, a pretty heated debate on forestry and sustainability issues. The taxonomy has been raised as an issue as well for sustainable investments. So these seminars address important research, policy, relevant topics, I would say, and we hope to get some support from all of you in identifying important ways to move forward. There are, I should say, also chances for funding for all our colleagues out there. To bigger calls opened this week, so have a look at the webpage. Already now, thanks to all the speakers that are coming up here and to you, Maria and Louise, and all the others involved in organizing this. Looking forward to hearing now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jonas. And I would just like to emphasize one of the things you said there, and that is we're really looking forward to the involvement of every participants that would like to share some knowledge. And there will be some different opportunities for that during this seminar and also afterwards, and I will guide you through that. So now you've heard a little bit about who is organizing this and what is on the agenda today. And now I'm very curious to at least learn a little bit about every participant that we have here in the seminar. I would, of course, love to get into a dialogue with every single one of you, but because of the sheer number and also the time constraints of this seminar, we had to think of a different solution. So we will use a Menti and Menti exercise here. So I will soon guide you over to another web page, but basically I'm curious to find out two things. First, what organization is it that you represent being here today? And the second thing, where is it that you're based? So I will now take you over to a Menti page, and I will ask you all to enter, let's see, I will guide you over here. I will ask you all to go into a page which is called www.menti.com, and you should be able to enter a code there. Let's see if we can get that onto the screen here. We will do our best to manage that. Let's see if we can make that work for you. There we go. And so if you enter www.menti.com, as you can see in the top here of the screen, and you should then be able to enter this code. It's 11, 30, 27 and 64. And I'm curious to learn here, are you representing academia being here today? Are you representing the private sector or perhaps the public sector? Thank you all for sharing. I can see that the picture here is now moving, and we can see that we have quite a lot of researchers, probably, people representing academia here. We also have a bit more than 30% from the public sector, and quite a few from the private sector as well, actually. Thank you so much for sharing. I will leave this page on, and we will save this because we are very interested to see who it is we are reaching with this exercise and this seminar. I also have a second question here for you, and that is, where are you based? So I have predefined the different Nordic countries here, but also curious to learn where else might you be from. So we can see that we managed to reach out to quite a few Swedes, but we're also here covering Norway, Finland, Iceland, and I can see we also have a couple of other countries probably represented. I could see in the participation list that I think we have some from the Latvia and some other Baltic states perhaps. Okay, thank you so much for that. So now we have a little bit of an idea where you're all from, and I will change back to my presentation and we will kick off with our first speaker for today. And first out today, we have the three speakers, but first out is Johan Stendahl, and I'm very much, Johan, looking forward to your talk here on forest soil carbon models as policy instrument. And Johan, you're working as a researcher at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and you're also heading the Swedish Forest Soil Inventory. And you've been working with these questions, I know, for quite a few years, and we really look forward to hear your thoughts and reflections on the topic for today. So I'm warmly handing over to you, Johan. The stage is yours. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you for inviting me. Very nice initiative this, to get together and discuss soil carbon. I will share my presentation now. All right. Okay, so my topic is for soil carbon modeling, and how it's implemented and used in policy in different ways. And I will take a rather large scale perspective. I realize that this topic could be applied on many different scales, but I will be talking about how this is used in kind of the international climate work, and more particularly in the climate reporting to the climate convention. Besides that, of course, these models are widely applied, for example, in these Earth system models that IPCC used for their climate assessments. And as well, they are used nationally for different assessments. But in this reporting, it's kind of more formalized, so to say. So it's integrated into these systems of climate reporting and inventories. And I will give you Nordic examples of this. And I will move into a little bit new insights on how they relate to these models that we use today. When you start with the boreal forest soils, I mean, they are a really strong and large stock of forest of carbon. So it's a dominant stock, and also a very large sink. But as you see to the left there, this is a picture you usually see, that this carbon stock in the soil, it exceeds that in the above ground compartments. And here it's only the carbon to 50 centimeter in the mineral soils as well, so it's really bigger. But when it comes to the sink or the balance, it is still the living biomass that is the most important part, and this is data from the Swedish National Inventory Report. Also, in the boreal forest soils, it's quite important, I think, to remember how they look, how they are, these soil profiles are formed, and that we have about 30% of the carbon stock in this organic humus layer sitting on top of the mineral soil, and this has some implications on modeling and hypothesis about carbon storage. Well, to the reporting then, forest soil carbon is an integrated part of this climate reporting systems organized by the UNFCCC and EU. Under the land use sector, LULUCF, we report annual changes in a range of different compartments of the forest ecosystem for managed forest land. And as you see here, you have the soil and dead organic matter, which is those organic humus layer I just mentioned. In the reporting, this sector as a whole cannot be a source. That is a commitment. And any surplus credits that is being generated, they can be translated or transferred to different parts of the reporting to the effort share regulation sector and vice versa. And also when it comes to the forest and the forest sink, it is you cannot account for all the total forest carbon sink, but it's in relation to a reference level, forest reference level, FRL, that is a formally set level, which is developed by modeling. So here modeling comes in. So modeling, it's done for the regular reporting by as an option. These Tier 3 more advanced methods for reporting, they include process-based models, which is what most countries apply under the Tier 3. It's basically only Sweden that relies on measurements by inventories. However, for the reference level, of course, modeling needs to be applied for Sweden as well. So this is an example of this, the reported uptakes and emissions from the different parts of the LULUCF sector. And you see that there's a large consistent sink general, and that the mineral soil is a strong sink, even though it's smaller than the living biomass. The reference level then, it was developed the other year based on modeling of the Swedish forests, assuming the same forestry practices as were under the period, a reference period, which was beginning of the 2000s. Also this modeling, of course, had to correspond to the reporting categories. What the purpose of this reference level is, that is basically to fulfill the the commitments under the Paris Agreement and to maintain or increase a carbon sink in the forest. So you cannot account for anything else but what is in addition to this reference level. And if you have a sink that is still a large sink, but a smaller sink than this reference level, you will have to account this as a source, and that has to be compensated in other sectors. All right, so modeling is the key part of the reporting, and it's in that way a very important and formal part in policy. And the models being used, they are well, the established models, and in general these models are input driven. So it's the accumulation of soil carbon is input driven in a sense that a higher input generates more soil organic carbon, and also the quality of the organic matter is the key regulating factor. And the two examples of models you see down below. In Sweden, we use the Q model, the continuous quality model, and Finland, Norway, and several other countries, they use the YASO model, which is to the right. There is, however, a potential problem with the current models being used, because there is a kind of an emerging view on soil carbon processing in the soil, highlighting, for example, mineral protection as a key factor, and microbial dynamics, and also interactions between the trees and microbes and the soil. These and to a lesser degree, it highlights the quality of the organic matter itself. So, and these are new research, new research, and it's not fully captured by these current models, which can cause problems. An example here is a review of slash extraction, that you remove slash from final fellings in forest. And here we looked at both experimental studies and modeling studies. And the experimental studies, they showed a range of effects from, well, of course, there were some studies showing a decrease in soil organic carbon, but many studies showed no effect, and a few even showed a positive effect, probably due to indirect factors. However, the modeling results, or the modeling studies, they all showed negative effects, that you had losses of soil carbon. And of course, this is because they are input driven. So this can cause problems if you try to look at things into the future. Here is an example of a recent study also looking into microbial interaction with ectomycorrhizal fungi and its relation to organic topsoil carbon storage, showing that key groups of ectomycorrhizal fungi that have the ability to decompose soil organic carbon and humus, they are negative. They can be negatively related to soil organic carbon. These fungi, they are also typical for mature and older forests, so and are key part of the nutrient cycling in those forests. But that would indicate that they would give a smaller storage of carbon in these humus layers as forests grow older. So this is kind of feedback processes that are not really part of the models today. Well, how did the forest reference levels perform then in the end? Well, they turned out pretty good, actually. You see in the second two rows here, it compares for Sweden the reference level and the situation or the reported situation during the reference period 2000 to 2009, and you see that the models they seem to reproduce or show a very similar outcome, and during this kind of short perspective, this model seemed to do a good job. For Finland, on the right hand side, of course, you're comparing models with models, so the agreement is extremely good. As a wrap up, I just quote a comment in the IPCC Special Report on Climate Change and Land that came the other year. And when it comes to soil carbon responses in general, they highlight that we need improved quantitative understanding of soil ecosystem processes, and that they will be increasingly important for projections of future land climate feedback interactions. So the models that we use today, they're probably good for these relatively short-term developments, but if we are predicting what is going to happen in the long term, we may go wrong, so to say. So this is, here we have some important knowledge gaps that need to be integrated and better understood and integrated into the models. That's it.
Thank you so much, Johan, for that presentation. You covered a lot of things here in your quick talk, but you talked about the modeling being a key part of the reporting, and also that the models are input driven. And you then mentioned the Q model on the Swedish side and the YASO model on the Finnish side. And I would like just to pick up on the last thing that you mentioned here on your final slide. But before doing that, I would also like to encourage our participants, if you have any questions for Johan, then you're more than welcome to post those in the chat. But Johan, you finished here by saying that there are some sort of challenges lying ahead of us in order to develop these models to be able to do predictions for the long term, if I understood you correctly. What is being done in this field, and is there anything that you or the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences are working on in terms of sort of moving ahead on this particular matter?
But there are currently efforts being done on this interaction between soil carbon and the ectomycorrhizal fungi. And preliminary models have been published on this. I think the problem or the limitation here, that is to validate them to be used on a large scale.
So the validation still remains to be done.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned a few kind of new important processes. And of course, you have to integrate all of them into these models. You cannot just concentrate on one feedback process.
Well, thank you so much, Johan. We will come back and discuss some of these questions further in the panel conversation later on. But I would like to thank you for now. And I would like to invite our second speaker for today. So we will now move from Sweden and we will move into Finland. And I would like to welcome Jari Liski, and you will talk to us about the Action Field Observatory and illustrating carbon farming effects on farms. And you're a research professor and head of unit at the FMI. And I know that you have been engaged with this kind of questions also for a long time, working with climate change and carbon cycle, etc. So we're very happy, Jari, to have you here with us today. And you're most welcome, and the stage is yours, Jari.
Thank you very much, Maria. And good morning, everybody listening. I'm very excited about this opportunity to present some of our work here. Now I just want to concentrate on doing this in the correct order. Like this. And the final step is here. Maria, may I ask that, is it okay now?
It looks perfect, Jari. You're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so today I'm going to talk about a field observatory that we have done to illustrate the carbon farming effects on farms. This is a part of a kind of an initiative called Carbon Action that was started in 2017 to develop and put into practice regenerative farming methods. And using these methods, the purpose is to, like the keywords there say, is to help to mitigate climate change and adapt agriculture to the effects of climate change, enhance biodiversity, improve soil health, and also improve the quality of water bodies, quite importantly, in the Finnish context, the quality of the Baltic Sea. And all this carbon action initiative, it means a close collaboration among researchers, farmers, companies, and other stakeholders. It is coordinated by a foundation called Baltic Sea Action Group, and then Finnish Meteorological Institute is coordinating the research that is part of the carbon action, even though the research is carried out in different universities and research institutes. And currently there are some 15 research projects on the Carbon Action platform, and you can read more about carbon action at that address, carbonaction.org. And then the development of a measurement, reporting, and verification method of soil carbon sequestration is a central research task in carbon action. And the field observatory I'm going to talk about now is a part of this work, our work on developing this so-called MRV methodology. So this field observatory, it is an online service, and you can find it there in that address, fieldobservatory.org. And the purpose of the field observatory is to visualize some of the work that we're doing. So we are developing the field observatory continuously as our work progresses. But currently it shows in near real time at some of our study sites the ecosystem functioning, the impacts of regenerative farming, the measurement technologies that we are using, the modeling approaches that we are using, and this all combined together, we want to visualize what kind of a measurement, reporting, and verification methodology we're developing. And we started to develop this field observatory because it supports our purposes by increasing the general awareness of regenerative farming possibilities. And also it's very important aspect of these MRV methods that they're transparent and you can trust in them. So we're thinking that it supports also by increasing the transparency and credibility to the approach that we're developing. And maybe we also think that this might be a kind of our vision of how future operational MRV methodologies may look like, how they combine the latest developments in measurement technologies and methods of ecological forecasting. And we are currently demonstrating this field observatory in Finland, but the data flows and the modeling that is behind there are equally applicable everywhere in the world. And then the picture on the right, it shows the front page of Field Observatory. And by clicking that header, online field data, it takes you to the map of the sites we have currently on the Field Observatory. So there are currently 2 intensively studied sites. You see those blue sites there. There's a forest grass field on mineral soil in Kvitia in southern Finland, and there's another forest grass field on organic soil in Ruukki, which is in the northern part of this map. And in addition to these 2 intensively studied sites, there are 20 ordinary farms who are conducting a carbon farming experiment on their field as a part of our carbon action initiative. Altogether, we have 100 farms carrying out these experiments across Finland, but so far we have included 20 of them in the field observatory. And then if you click on one of these sites on the map, it takes you to that site and shows what is going on there right now, how the past has been. And quite recently, we have also added a forecasting feature to the Kvitia site. Now, for example, clicking on the Kvitia site, the Kvitia sites, you get the map, or like on any site you get the map. But Kvitia is special in the case that it is one of our intensive study sites, but it also has a carbon farming experiment. And this experiment, it means that it practices a tailored carbon farming practice on a 1.5 hectare piece of their land, and carries like a business as usual reference or for comparison, the ordinary practice on another 1.5 hectares. And the vegetation, the various variables on this field observatory, I'm going to tell about a couple of them. The vegetation greenness we are observing currently using Sentinel-2 satellite. Vegetation greenness is a very important proxy, of course, of photosynthesis, and also we are using that as a kind of to inform also our modeling. So the Sentinel-2 satellite, it flies over these sites every 2 to 3 days, and whenever it takes a successful measurement, the data is brought to the field observatory, and we show it here. So there's this these circles with a number in them shows that for how many of our fields at Kvitia it has taken a successful measurement. Here, for example, this is the screenshot that I took yesterday when preparing these slides. It shows that how the Kvitia side has started to become greener from the beginning of April. So this is during this spring. And if you scroll down this page, you see other data, for example, carbon dioxide exchange between the field and the atmosphere. So we are taking these continuous and automatic carbon dioxide flux measurements of the flux between the field and the atmosphere in Kviikki and in our Ruukki site. So we are measuring that using the eddy covariance method. And these values there on the top left corner graph of this slide show how the carbon sink during the day show that the site become to be a carbon sink during the day from the mid-April onwards, and then during the night the peaks on the positive side show that during the nights the site was a carbon source because the photosynthesis was stopped, but soil respiration still emitted carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Then the daily averages, the smoother line there shows that also the daily averages dropped to the sink side quite recently with the onset of the growing season. And then in addition to measurements, we are also modeling this carbon balance at these sites. And we are working on adding this Yasso model that our group develops, with also Johan mentioned in his presentation. So far we have used the Pascra model, but we are working on to adding the Yasso model as a soil component of this Pascra model there. So, and a couple of weeks ago, we were quite excited to be ready to add a 15-day forecast of carbon dioxide fluxes and the carbon sequestration to this field observatory. So you see with this again on the top left corner, the green area shows our forecast of how the carbon sequestration will continue at this Kvitia site during the next 15 days. So this forecast is updated every day around noon Finnish time, taking into account the weather forecast and also assimilating the carbon dioxide flux data. And also later we are adding the assimilation of this leaf area index, which is measured by this satellite. So it's pretty similar to like making weather forecasts, and actually we are using a similar kind of approaches there. And this is one of the first agricultural carbon sequestration or carbon dioxide flux forecasts in the world. Just another example that if you clicked on and zoomed out, then you can see like a longer time period. And I zoomed out and took a picture of what happened during the last year, during the last growing season, just to show that the leaf area index, for example, you see how the leaf area index increased during the spring. The first harvest was carried out in the mid-June. It dropped, started to increase again, and then another harvest at the end of August and beginning of September. And that also then affected the carbon dioxide flux that after harvesting, the site became a carbon source for a short period of time after being a carbon sink during the rest of. So that just to indicate that also these kind of things that we can observe using this field observatory. And then technically we are collecting, how we've done this is that we are collecting all the data that is shown on the field observatory to a server that we have established for this purpose at Finnish Meteorological Institute. So we are storing and processing the data there and then showing them in the field observatory. And there, to the references, I've added a link to a paper from the end of last year, where our senior researcher Stendahl and her co-authors described these ideas that we have included in the field observatory and what we are illustrating there. And also these are sort of ideas of ecological forecasting. And Isten will be talking more about this approach in the next week's seminar of this series. Yes, and I want to finish by finally acknowledging those who are behind this field observatory. So I want to acknowledge my colleagues at Finnish Meteorological Institute, Häme University of Applied Sciences, Finnish Environment Institute, and the Baltic Sea Action Group. Then we have been receiving funding from the Strategic Research Council at the Academy of Finland and also from the flagship program of the Academy. We are collaborating with Predictive Ecosystem Analyzer Group, PCAN for short, and then finally this field observatory can be found at that address, fieldobservatory.org. I'll stop here. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jari. Thank you for that interesting talk. And also thanks for some of the actions here in the comments and the chat function. I can see that some links have already been shared. So Jari, you're talking here about the field observatory. Now I found it quite interesting. You in one of your first slides, you said that one of the reasons you're working with this is to sort of increase awareness and trust. And I would really like to hear you elaborate a little bit more on that. So how come do you perceive a need for that? And also, have you got any reactions from your target groups working on this?
Yeah, well, that was among the group we were discussing that these common methods combining different like traditional soil measurements, then more of these like the wireless technologies and all these kind of new measurement technologies, and then that combined with ecological modeling, like Johan also talked about, and then all these kind of these adding these to kind of these cyber establishing or completing the cyber infrastructure where the measurements, models, and then all this like the computing is carried out, is that no matter how sort of clearly you try to explain that to the stakeholders, it's still sort of, I felt and our group felt that it still remains somehow kind of a distant. That is that really happening? Can that really be done? So then we decided that why don't we take a step towards that direction and start illustrating this like in a very transparent manner, that these are the measurements we're taking, this is what the measurements show, this is how we process the measurement, this is how we combine them, and this is what our the verification methodology does, and now this is what it forecasts. We're able to follow, does it forecast it, how well it forecasts that. So that was really, it's like something in between disseminating our results and our work in general, and then between doing the science. Then of course it's like the kind of the workflow that we have behind our field observatory is we have to have that workflow anyhow to carry out these carbon sequestration calculations for our verification methodology. So this is the kind of the field observatory just visualizes that. But I'm very interested to sort of about this question and that you picked that up, because then, well, the critics have said that why you're investing so much on something which is not exactly like the science that you should be doing. But how the response has been that this has been maybe some of the critics, but not very much of that. I think this is very new, and I think we've heard a very positive comments about that. So I think it's been a good solution. And then one thing I want to mention here is that this is also kind of that as I said, that we're developing the field observatory all the time, and then it's just like a learning by doing. So it's also like we want to also kind of make it visible how research is a kind of a process where you do something, then you see what works and what doesn't work as well as you would like it to work, then you improve and how that improves. So that is the process. Long answer, but the question was so that I like it so much that I wanted to give you these thoughts. I've been thinking about that a lot.
Thank you so much, Jari, for elaborating on that. That was quite interesting to hear. We have a few questions from the participants, Jari, and I'd just like to raise one of them at this occasion. So we have someone asking here, which factors on the grass field are you testing to increase carbon sequestration?
Yeah, so indeed we have had some like experiments our own where we have really tested the kind of this, which kind of farming methods would have an effect on the carbon sequestration capacity of the grass field. And the factors that we have tested is this the cutting height of when you take the harvest. We have varieties cutting height, with the idea being that if you leave more, will the carbon sink recover more like quickly than it would otherwise if you cut it very short. Cutting height is one, fertilizing is another one. Then we are testing the number of the variety of grass species that you use in what you grow. I think for the grass, those have been the major ones: the cutting height, the fertilizing, and then the number of these species that your grass field consists of.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Jari. And we will come back to you in a little while when we get into the conversation with the three speakers. But for now, I would like to thank you, Jari, and I would like to move over to Denmark. And I would like to invite our Danish speaker for today. It's Søren Collin Hvid from SEGES, or Danish Agricultural and Food Council in English. And Søren, you will be talking about carbon modeling for Danish farms. So we very much look forward to that. And I know you've been working with different aspects of nitrogen, but also crop production and greenhouse gas accounting for many years. So you're very welcome, Søren, and I would like to give you the word, and I will open up your presentation for you. So if you bear with me for a second, Søren, we will change that for you. Let's see. And I think we should be ready for you, Søren. So just let me know, just say next, Søren, when you want me to change the slide. The stage is yours.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to give a presentation about the greenhouse gas accounting tool we are developing for Danish farmers. Next slide, please. Yeah, I work at SEGES. SEGES is a National Agricultural Advisory Center in Denmark, and it is a part of the farmers organization called the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, just for your information. Next slide, please. SEGES and the organization called Organic Denmark develops a web-based greenhouse gas accounting tool for Danish farmers, and the first version will be released later this year. With the tool, greenhouse gas emissions will be calculated both at farm level and at product level. We use the calculation methods and the emission factors, which are also used for the national greenhouse gas inventory. And one of the purposes with the tool is also to provide data for the feed and food companies. Next slide, please. In Denmark, we have a rather strict and detailed nitrogen regulation, and the nitrogen regulation is controlled through something we call fertiliser accounts, and these accounts contains quite a lot of information about the farms and the production on the farms. So we are actually using these data also to calculate the greenhouse gas accounts. Next slide, please. So with the tool, greenhouse gas accounts will be calculated automatically for each farm with data from the fertilizer accounts. We have to add some standard values to cover all aspects of the greenhouse gas account, but for example about electricity, fuel, etc. But most of the data can actually be taken from the fertilizer accounts. Then the farmer can add extra data, and he can correct the existing data in the tool. There's also a possibility to choose different instruments to reduce the greenhouse gas account, and then present some scenarios between the actual greenhouse account. Next slide, please. Well, we cover all the greenhouse gases with the account, but I think to understand nitrous oxide emissions is complicated, but the calculation of the nitrous oxide emissions are rather easy because we have information about most of the nitrous oxide sources from the fertilizer account, and then we use these rather simple emission factors. But I think in the future, more differentiated emission factors are strongly needed. Next slide, please. It's more complicated with carbon sequestration because carbon can both be, soils can both be a source for carbon dioxide and a sink. And I think we want to answer two questions for the farmer with the tool. We want to inform the farmer about how his crop rotation and cultivation practice perform compared to others. And this question entirely focuses on the input of carbon. But we also want to answer the question, how much net carbon sequestration do I have in my fields in absolute numbers? And to answer the last question, we also need to know the output of carbon dioxide from the soils. And then we need to know the content of carbon in the soil and the turnover. Next slide, please. So I think carbon sequestration is a matter of input and output of carbon to the soil. And carbon input is from crop residues and from manure, and the output is from mineralization of the soil organic matter. Next, please. The carbon input is calculated from the crop yields and crop-specific crop residue parameters, and also the carbon content in manure. We're able to do that, I think, for all farms, of course, more or less precise, but we are able to do it. Next, please. It's more complicated with the output because here we require soil data. We need to know something about the soil organic carbon pools at field level, and we do not have that information. And we also need to use a soil carbon model. In Denmark, for the national inventory on greenhouse gases, we use a carbon model developed by Aarhus University called C-Tool. And we are also going to use this carbon model in this for the calculations at farm level. Next slide, please. So we are going to calculate carbon sequestration in two ways, and I just shown here an example about what we call the relative carbon sequestration. And in this example, I have a spring crop with and without harvest of the straw, and there's also a grass crop. We need information about the yields. Next slide. And from the yields, we calculate the carbon input into the soil with these crop residue parameters. Next slide. And then we compare the input in the specific field with the average carbon input into Danish soils. It has been calculated to a little bit more than 4,000 kilo carbon per hectare per year in average. And this figure is just used as a reference. Next slide. And then we calculate the climate effect in a 100-year perspective. And as you can see, the spring barley crop here has a negative climate effect, and the grass has a positive climate effect. This is just an example of a carbon calculation without having any information about the carbon content in the soil. Next slide. But actually, in our tool, we want to do it in two ways. We want to make the relative calculation, as I just showed in this previous example. Next slide. No, next click, yes. And we also want to calculate the absolute carbon sequestration. The input is calculated in the same way, but then we also use the C-tool model. And we will try to get data about the soil organic carbon pools, either from soil maps, which is rather unprecise, or from soil samples to initiate the carbon model. And then when this model is up and running, we are able to, hopefully, to calculate the development in the soil organic carbon pools in a correct way. So I think in order to answer the questions which are relevant for the farmer, I think both approaches here are needed. So thank you for your attention.
Much, Søren. I think that was very informative presentation. I picked out quite a few things, but we actually have a question here from the audience. I would like to go straight to that to ensure we have time for it. So we have a question for you here, Søren, saying, do you see any risks in using the emission factors that are meant to be used on a national level, but you're using them on a farm level, so on a very local level? Do you see any risks in that?
If we are talking about the nitrous oxide emissions, I think the emission factors we have right now are very general, and the variation at local level is huge, also from year to year. So we really need much more differentiated emission factors, and probably also models to calculate more precise emissions from year to year and from farm to farm. So there's, I think, there's a long way to go yet before we can calculate it more precise.
Thank you for that, Søren. And I also have a second question here, which I guess could be directed to you. Let's try. So the question goes like this, Søren: how soil clay content is involved in the carbon model? So how is the soil clay content involved in the model?
In the C-tool model, which is developed by Aarhus University, also take in the clay content. It has some influence on the turnover of the organic pool. C-tool is what's it called? Tree pool model, and it's clay content is a part of it, and also temperature and the history of the organic matter. The total amount of organic matter is divided into different pools with different turnover rates.
Thank you so much, Søren, for clarifying that. I think it was also very interesting when you touched upon the two questions. So from the farmer perspective, how does my crop rotation and cultivation practice sort of perform compared to others, and how much net carbon do I have? So I think that's very interesting as well. Thank you so much, Søren, for sharing some information. We have now had the pleasure to listen to the three speakers today, and I would now like to invite all of you to come back and to turn your camera on, and I would like to engage in a couple of questions with you. And I would again like to encourage our participants here to engage in the chat if there's something you want to ask our speakers for today. So now we have Jari, Søren and Johan here on the screen. Thank you so much, all three of you, for your presentations from some different perspective and from the three different countries here today. And I would like to kick off with a sort of a Nordic perspective question, because this seminar is organized from sort of a Nordic arena, and I'm curious to hear your reflection on, are there or is there any value and potential in increased Nordic collaboration when we're talking about these methods and models? So if I direct the question to you first, Johan, and then I will ask Jari and Søren, do you see any value and potential in an increased Nordic collaboration, and how could that then be organized?
Yeah, I would say definitely yes. And I'm saying that both from a more research perspective, I think it's good to tie our countries and research groups closer together, but also as a physical geographer and a geologist, I mean, from a biophysical geographical perspective, I mean, the boreal forest and the forest in general that we have in the Nordic, I mean, it is kind of separate from, at least from continental Europe, and I think we need to have a strong collaboration in order to develop and develop the knowledge on our systems, and also to be kind of a voice in this discussion and debate about forests and climate from our perspective.
Thank you, Johan. So I hear you saying that we have similar conditions and that create a possibility to collaborate, and there's also sort of an advantage in creating a common Nordic voice in the international discussions with regards to soil carbon sequestration. Did I catch you correctly there?
Yeah.
Thank you. I will move on to Jari. Do you have any reflections on this with Nordic cooperation?
Yes, you asked about are there any possibilities for that. I would say that there's like a lot, like a huge amount of them, and in the past, like me and my research group has like a very valuable collaboration with all of the Nordic countries, like with Sweden, with this very intensive like soil inventory of forest soils that Johan is now the head of, whereas the Finnish inventory is very much based on our use of our Jasso model, and now it's very important for us to test the validity of our modeling approach here in Finland, how reliable that is, and then the Swedish data has been just invaluable in testing that. We did that work, maybe that was something like 10 years ago or something like that. And then Norway is using the Jasso model, like Johan mentioned in his presentation, using the Jasso model in their greenhouse gas inventory, and in a very advanced manner, and they have done a lot of work with then the climate conditions within Norway are more heterogeneous than in Finland. That has given us really a lot of useful information of how the Jasso model works, or how it doesn't work in the conditions, in the very rainy conditions of the Norwegian mountains. And then with Denmark, we've had a lot of collaboration with with this afforestation experiments and this kind of so a lot. And then maybe a couple of points to that is that so that is to say that all of the countries, we have our own kind of strengths, and like putting these together, I think that we would certainly be more than the sum of all these countries doing the Nordic cooperation. Then another thing is that like you have mentioned, that we have these climatic and geographical conditions are such that they're different from many parts of the rest of the world. So that's really sort of similar conditions here. And then also kind of as a kind of a scientific, how would I say, not the center of excellence, but that kind of so that we would have more kind of impact in the scientific community, even if we work together. And then still another thing that comes into my mind is that when we are talking about now of this soil carbon sequestration and enhancing it, it's important to consider also the stakeholders and who are the ones making the decisions. There are companies who are operating in different Nordic countries. The same companies are operating in different countries, doing different operations there. So definitely we would also have better possibilities of stronger interaction with the business stakeholders, but also on the administration side. So I would say that there's numerous opportunities, and I personally feel that we haven't really taken the full advantages of these possibilities yet, but I think now it would be high time to do that.
Thank you for sharing those reflections, Jari. You mentioned a lot of interesting things here, and I think definitely the last one is something that we will take with us, that there is opportunity to increase the collaboration. That's what I heard you say last. But you also mentioned this importance of being able to share data and testing the models with the data from different parts of the Nordic region, and that there are some great advantages in being able to do so. And you mentioned the heterogeneous conditions in Norway being good for testing your YASO model. And I also find it quite interesting here, you mentioned that some of the stakeholders we're working with might already be sort of on the Nordic arena, and it will be easier to collaborate with them as well if we have a collaboration among researchers, for example. I will let Søren share a reflection as well. How do you see the potential in an increased Nordic collaboration working with these models and methods?
Well, I would say there's definitely a huge need for collaboration. I mean, we are lacking so much information in order to make a proper greenhouse gas calculation, but also in order to develop instruments to mitigate the emissions. I could just give a very simple example. For example, in Denmark, we grow more than 200 different crops, and just to calculate the carbon input from the yield and what they do with the straw and so on, we need these crop residue parameters to estimate the above ground residues and the below ground residues. But those parameters are very coarse and not very detailed, and for many crops there are no data. So just this simple example, huge research is needed to improve the calculation methods, and the need for research is far beyond the budgets for research. and we are lacking time. So therefore, some kind of collaboration where maybe we also divide who is looking into different subjects could be useful, definitely.
Thank you for sharing, Søren. I hear you say several things, but you definitely said that we're lacking information and we're lacking time. Hence, it's very important to find sort of efficient collaboration modes. Thank you. I'm also curious to hear your reflection on sort of, is there any specific message we can bring forward to the politicians or the decision makers within the Nordic region? Because this seminar is organized and funded by the Nordic Council of Ministers, and it would also be summarized into a policy brief being sent to the decision makers. So from your perspective, what's the message we cannot miss? What's the message we have to sort of bring forward in that policy brief? Talking about the methods and models for soil carbon sequestration. If we start with you, Jari, this time, and then we move to Johan and we end with Søren. Do you have any reflection, Jari, you'd like to share? Any message you would like us to bring forward to the Nordic decision makers?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Maybe I kind of reflected also some of the things that are relevant also to this question, but I'm like my first reaction is just that together we would be stronger and bigger in the scientific arena, but also when we're talking about these negotiations about the climate policies and stuff. And I think our researchers' role is to tell the decision makers that what the science is capable of doing, what is the status of this verification methodologies of soil carbon sequestration, for example, because if we cannot calculate in a credible and acceptable way the carbon sequestered, it's not possible to plan any policies on that. So I would just say that there's so much sort of like a strength among the Nordic countries that are also sort of the one country is especially strong at that, and another country is especially strong at that. I mean that, and that is why I think it's fair to say that summing up these countries is more than the arithmetic sum of the number of these countries. Maybe these are just the reflections and Also, maybe I would like my experience is one of that is it's not so straightforward, even though it has been so easy among the Nordic countries, that I've also always enjoyed the collaboration with the colleagues from the Nordic countries and also the communities of the different countries, because it's so easy. So that also, I think, also is a kind of a reason to also to favor this collaboration, that there will unlikely be very serious risks that it will not result in the good results that it will. So maybe these are just my reflections at this point, Maria.
Thank you, Jari. I think that's definitely something worth highlighting, that it's quite a low risk that a collaboration would not work. We have many similarities and a long track record of collaboration so far. And together we're stronger and wiser, I heard you say. Johan, would you like to share a reflection? Is there any message you would like to bring forward to the Nordic decision makers?
Yeah, okay, big question. But from a forest soil carbon perspective, I think it's important that also the policymakers are aware of the kind of quite large need to develop the knowledge on soil carbon dynamics related to these processes that I mentioned during my presentation, and that, I mean, we're not ready with the forest soil carbon yet for many decades, because I mean, there's an urgent need to produce like results and conclusions right now, in particular because forest is generally in focus when it comes to the climate change work, but also since there's so much carbon stored in the soil. So there are great expectations to deliver here, but we still need to do a lot of research. That's a boring researcher answer, I think. When it comes to the Nordic collaboration, I mean, we have, as Jari mentioned, I mean, we are really in the front when it comes to modeling, and we have a lot of inventory data to verify and validate this. And together we could, and also we have a lot of activities within these kind of new fields and processes going on. So perhaps we could integrate this work a little bit more, and more specifically orient that towards the boreal forest soils.
Thank you for your reflection, Johan. I hear you saying that there is an sort of great expectations or an intensive request on delivering results, but that research needs to sort of take its time, and that we're not quite yet there providing all the answers yet. But I also hear that you're saying, for example, in terms of modeling, we are in the front. Thank you. And I think you touched upon something I would like to ask you next, and that is whether there are sort of any low-hanging fruits. So where do we actually start? What can we do already tomorrow or the next week? But I will save that for a second, and I will let Søren share your reflection, and I will come back to the low-hanging fruits. Søren, would you like to add something to Jari and Johan's reflections?
Well, I have already mentioned that more research is needed, but besides that, I would like to mention that huge investments in developing the digital infrastructure in the agricultural business is highly needed, because greenhouse gas accounting requires a lot of data, and when we are developing measures, instruments to mitigate, more and more data are needed, because it becomes more and more specific and detailed, and we need data about almost everything going on in the fields and in the staples. And these huge amounts of data has to be passed on from the farm to all the way to the national inventory, greenhouse gas inventory. So it's really a huge task to develop an digital infrastructure which are able to do all this.
Thank you, Søren, for adding that to the conversation here, the digital infrastructure. I hear you saying that we need vast amounts of data in order to do these calculations, and how actually to retrieve that and manage that. And I guess there's a lot of sort of legal as well as technical challenges associated with these large data sets. And touching upon that, I could just say that Nordic Forest Research and Nordic Agri Research are running something called a Nordic Testbed Network, a network of test environments facilitating digital development both within forestry and agriculture. So you're more than welcome to check that out, and maybe Jonas or Katarina could share the link in the chat if someone is interested to visit that website. I would like to finish off here with the last question, just see if I can push you a little bit and challenge you in being as tangible, concrete as possible. What could be sort of a very concrete next step, something we could start working with quite soon in terms of actually realizing an increased Nordic collaboration? I think Johan and Jari, you touched upon this already, but is there anything you would like to elaborate on or specify? I leave the word to Johan first this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be really fruitful to try to organize workshops. I mean, specific workshops, for example, for the forest soils questions and other for agricultural soils, because I think everybody's very much engaged in different activities, because there is such a large interest in this climate change and carbon issue. So you need to kind of pull people out of their current activities and get them together in a Nordic context.
Thank you for that suggestion, Johan, to actually arrange Nordic workshops. That's tangible, definitely. Jari, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yes, Maria, thanks. So I think the fruit that is hanging the lowest is just to putting the pieces that we have together, if we're now talking about the verification methodology, or taking a leap forward in increasing the readability in these verification methodologies, because we have strong measurements, we have strong models, we have computing environments which are able of handling these, and we have these new measurement technologies. So it's just of putting these together. What we have already now is that would be like a big leap forward. And then I want to reflect on that when Johan said that certainly we would need to know more about the soil carbon sequestration as we do, but still the kind of the need for this information in the society and in this whole climate change problem is so huge that we just cannot wait and say that we will have better answers in 5 years' time. And that is at least the kind of the approach that we have taken in our research group, is that, like I tried to say when presenting our field observatory, that we are showing what we have at the moment. And what is important there is that I didn't mention that, but we are working very hard on giving reliable uncertainty estimates for our estimates. So that's the thing that you need to be. What is important to know is that how certain you can be of those things, and that is what I'm talking about. Putting the things together, and then, even though that's not perfect, analyzing how reliable the estimates are, and then when putting these together, it's possible to identify those measurements or those features in the models that contribute most to the remaining uncertainty. And then I just see that then maybe the final thing that I want to mention now is that there is like a rapidly growing mismatch between the value of this soil carbon sequestration information in the society and the how much we know about that and how much we invest on improving the knowledge. I mean, that is just growing so very rapidly, so that it's on the research side is difficult to keep up with the pace of the demand of this information in the society. And that is at least something that I am struggling with. There's research money for this topic, but still the need for the increasing the reliability of this knowledge and the kind of the applicability of this knowledge to normal farms and to the forests of normal forest owners is so huge that it is just that I feel like that it's not enough what we're doing, because we cannot proceed as quickly as we would need to meet the demands of the society. So this mismatch is something that I want to say aloud here. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I hear you saying, well, the lowest hanging fruit is actually putting together the pieces we already have. And I also hear you saying here that we can't wait. We need to be able to communicate and discuss what we already have. And I think that fits very neatly into the seminar that we will have next week, when we will discuss exactly this. And I definitely agree with your last reflection here on how can we actually keep up to date with the knowledge development that is ongoing in this field at the moment. That is a challenge that needs to be addressed as well. I will leave the final word to Søren here before we end the panel conversation. Søren, is there something you would like to add to what Johan and Jari has already mentioned here?
So one thing is cooperation within research, but I work in the advisory service, and we are right now developing a greenhouse gas accounting tool for the farmers. But I think the tools would look more or less the same in different countries. So I think it could be really interesting to also establish some cooperation about the development of tools for farmers in the Nordic countries, because I think most of the content in such tools would be the same. So maybe a common platform for this kind of calculations, because it's rather expensive, and it's it has to be maintained, and it's also expensive, and as I mentioned before, more and more data is needed. So it will grow in the years. So I think cooperation also on this more practical level would be useful.
Thank you so much for adding that, Søren. So cooperation on the tools for farmers, or a common platform in terms of that. I have taken a lot of notes today, and of course we have recorded this seminar, so we will be sure to take note of all your suggestions here. Thank you so much to all three speakers. I'm very happy that you took the time to talk to us here today, and thank you for your presentations and your elaborations here in the discussion session. Thank you so much, and I will now move on to the final parts of the seminar here today. I would like to invite also all of you participants to share some reflections. So I will here change over to a Menti page for about 2 minutes. And let you, if you would like, to share some of your ideas and thoughts on this topic. And I'm very curious to learn here, in terms of the Nordic collaboration, what do you think is the next step? And I will also, in the coming weeks, send out a very short couple of question survey. So if you would like to provide more input and your thoughts on this topic, you are more than welcome. But let's start with the Menti exercise here, just to gather some of your thoughts if you would like to share. So I would suggest that you go into and I will change my slide so you can see it, into the Menti page as you did before. So we here have the www.menti.com again, and we have the new code. It's 51 24 63 and 95. And you can here add a few lines, your thoughts and reflections. And while you do that, I just want to say that maybe some of you have perceived some challenges in getting the details in the PowerPoint slides that have been shared. And this is a limitation within Zoom. So we're trying to work out how we can solve that for the next time, so every slide will be clear to you. I can, however, say that the recording of this seminar is crystal clear, and it will be shared on the SNS and NKJ websites, and you will get an email about that when it's ready to watch. So there you can see all the details. So here we have the Menti page. So if you would like to share, you're more than welcome. The question is Nordic collaboration on soil carbon methods and models. What is the next step? So we have a few of you sharing some ideas here. Platform for sharing data. definitely something that could be interesting in the Nordic context. Increased Nordic collaboration, I take that first one as. I would also like to say that I will keep this Menti open, so even after we close the seminar here today in a few minutes, this page will be open, so you can continue to add your input if you like. Farming tools we get here, because some of these questions might need some sort of thinking and reflection before you would like to share your ideas. But again, I want to emphasize that we are very interested to hear your thoughts on this. So you can do it over the Menti, of course, get in contact with us directly, or answer the short survey that will be sent to your email. So thank you. I will go back to my presentation and finish off. We will see. And I would now like to invite Per Hansson, who is Secretary General for Nordic Agri Research, to hear, Per, what do you take with you from today?
Thank you, Maria. Yes, as usual, I almost say a very interesting seminar today, and very much useful knowledge presented. I would look a little bit backwards, look back to where it all began, like 5 years ago or something like that, when the ministers had their meeting in Norway, and for the first time raised the questions about how is soil in carbon measured and modeled in the different Nordic countries. And that was the beginning of like a 5-year process within the Nordic countries, driven by NKJ, SNS, and also the Nordic Council of Ministers. So, and as several of the speakers today have raised, this is a question that has been evolved very rapidly, and as an economist, it's nice to hear in this kind of seminars the terms supply and demand, even if it was about research. There is a huge need of knowledge in this area. And the policymakers are really striving to get their hands on relevant knowledge to get into policy, to get these things going the right way, in a relevant way. Yeah. I could summarize that this meeting shows the need of continued developed knowledge, continued work with measurements, modeling, calculation, digital in infrastructure, and also, which came up here late, tools for practitioners, tools for farmers to make it possible to collect this data, to get use of this data. There is, I agree with that there is a huge potential in the Nordic collaboration, not at least when we look out into what's coming in the European context, farm to fork, European Horizon Europe with its mission of soil health and so on. So I think it has been very interesting. We have almost had a glimpse into what it means to putting things together, and yeah, I would end with a big thank you to the organizers and our guide in the galaxy, Maria Thunberg. It's been a very interesting seminar, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Per. Thank you for those words, and thank you for everyone participating today. And you're most welcome back next week if you would like. We will then discuss Digital Knowledge Center for Soil Carbon Sequestration. That will be very interesting, I think. So thank you so much for today. I wish you a nice lunch and afternoon. Bye for now.